The rumours keep on coming. Arsenal are linked with a Japanese international and a championship star with a very famous brother. We'll bring you all the latest from the chaos that is social media during a January transfer window. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, how are we? Hope you're all well. Hope you're all looking forward to the weekend as much as I am. Arsenal back in action, which is always great. Big game coming up down at the Amex against a tricky opponent in Brighton and Hove Albion. Not in the greatest form, but they're a tricky opponent nonetheless. We'll talk a little bit more about them on, of course, the preview show that will be dropping first thing on Saturday morning. It's a late kickoff, so make sure that you pick that one up nice and early. It will be in your podcast feeds from about 5 a.m. and it will be available on YouTube from just a little bit later, just because YouTube works very, very differently. But anyway, good to see you all. I hope you're having a nice morning so far. I thought I'd start the day with some transfer chat. That is, in fact, what everybody wants to hear at the minute, isn't it? And it seems to dominate the football world when we get to this time of year. In some ways, it feels like the game's become a bit of a side note. I certainly personally don't see it that way. And I find it quite hard to adjust my mindset to like talk about transfer rumors as much as we're talking about the actual football. It doesn't sit right with me. When the summer window comes, you do so much of it. And obviously in the absence of football, it kind of becomes your sort of your sanctuary, if you like, and it's okay. But when you're talking about during the season, I find it really, really difficult to switch focus from games to transfer stories and transfer rumors. Look, we got quite a bit to get into again this morning because there's a few names being thrown about. We're going to get into those. We're going to talk Takefusa Kubo, the Real Sociedad man, being linked with a move to Arsenal. We're going to discuss some reports of an unnamed player being close to agreeing personal terms with Arsenal. And I haven't got a problem with the person who's reported this, but I do have a problem with this type of reporting, and we'll get into that on this episode as well. We're going to talk about Jobe. Is it Jobe or Jobi Bellingham? I'm not sure how you say it, but Jude Bellingham's brother is attracting interest from a lot of clubs, and one of them is said to be Arsenal. Could he be a good option? Plus, we're going to talk Evan Ferguson, because that's a name that I constantly see cropping up on my X feed and sort of on other Arsenal platforms, and I just don't really feel the hype around Evan Ferguson, if I'm being completely and brutally honest with you. Good morning to everybody that is in the live chat. Good to see so many of you with us. Happy New Year to those of you that are joining us for the first time in 2025. Thank you for being here. If I could ask you, if you're on YouTube and you watch regularly, you know what you're going to get. Leave a like. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review, particularly if you're an Apple podcast, because we're really slacking on the reviews on that side. And when I look at the numbers and I look at how many of you tune in on a regular basis as well, it's baffling to me how we don't have more reviews. So it doesn't cost a thing. It takes a couple of seconds. If you really don't like the podcast, then don't bother leaving a review, because I don't want negative ones. But if you do enjoy the podcast and you wish to support, it's not just via Patreon that you can support. Things like leaving us reviews, all of that good stuff really, really does help. Okay, then, shall we get into it? Shall we start by discussing Takefusa Kubo, the Real Sociedad attacker who's being linked with a move to Arsenal? Now, there was a report from a Japanese journalist yesterday in which it was said that Arsenal have an interest in the 23-year-old Japanese winger, and that the winger himself is well aware of this and would be open to a move to Arsenal. Now, I think coming from Real Sociedad, of course, you'd be open to a move to Arsenal. We've seen it happen. It's a move. It's a transfer that has happened in the past. And what I mean by that is Real Sociedad to Arsenal. We've done those types of deals before. And this is interesting because we've been talking a lot about who the new sporting director will be at Arsenal, and if there will be an equivalent to Edu, or if there will be a slightly new role carved out. We're not entirely sure what that's going to look like just yet. But one of the people that's been sort of heavily linked is, of course, Roberto Olabe, who for such a long time has been holding that role and that position at Real Sociedad. 57 years old. He's got a good personal relationship already, from what we understand, with Mikel Arteta. He's said to be Mikel's first choice. And obviously, if Kubo is a player that we're seriously interested in, he will be someone that could give us insight into the player, and B, who could probably open some doors, break down some barriers, maybe in the negotiations between the two clubs, but also on a sort of club to player level, because of course he will have some knowledge and some understanding of Takefusa Kubo, the human, and obviously I'm sure he'll know his representatives from past dealings and stuff. What do I think about this player? Well, he's a player that's been talked about for quite some time as someone who's maybe ready to go on to that next level, that next step up from a club like Real Sociedad. And at 23 years old, there's still plenty of room and time, obviously, for him to grow. He does have a contract there until June the 30th, 2029. So if you're going to get him out of there, you're going to have to pay. This isn't one that you can get on the cheap. This isn't a player that you can push Real Sociedad into letting go in a cut price deal, because their situation is, quite frankly, the opposite of desperate when it comes to him. According to Transfermarkt, he is valued at around about 40 million euros. Now, I always say this, these values and these valuations, they're not gospel. Like, you shouldn't look at them and say that's an absolute, but they do give you a good indication, I think, particularly when you don't know a great deal about the player, as I don't about Takefusa Kubo. Now, if we get to the point where this appears to be moving forward and that there's a little bit more behind it, then we will do one of our scouting report videos and podcasts. We will analyze the guy in a lot more depth, in a lot more detail. But just looking at some of the top line stats, he's got 18 appearances in La Liga this season, 3 goals. So it's not like outstanding. It's not dreadful either, but it's not the type of record that makes you go, oh my God, we have to go and get this guy. Now, I think it's important when you look at players that you understand and acknowledge that there are players who go through difficult patches. So what I'd quite like to do is look back at the 23-24 season as well, where it's a complete season, to try and get a more well-rounded sort of view or look at Takefusa Kubo and maybe what his level is. And if I go back to the 23-24 season, we're talking about 30 La Liga appearances, 7 goals and 4 assists. So you're talking 11 direct goal contributions. That's a direct goal contribution, pretty much 1 in every 3 games. It's not bad, obviously, but it's not amazing either. So what is it about Takefusa Kubo that people seem to really like? Well, from some conversations I've had with people that watch La Liga a lot closer than I do over the last sort of 24 hours, it seems to be that he's a really good dribbler. He seems really tricky. And not just because he's Japanese, I've heard him compared to Karu Mitoma in terms of his style, that type of winger. The nationality is just a coincidence, but in terms of the comparisons that I hear, that's who he kind of reminds me of, only he plays from the right-hand side. He's got 40 caps for Japan, which is not to be sniffed at. Just 5 goals, though, for the national team. And yeah, sort of looking back at his history, because I think that's important to do as well. He started over in Japan. He came to Spain and joined Barcelona. And Xavi, very, very famously, Barcelona legend, of course, took this guy up and said he's an incredible talent, really, really good talent, somebody that, people should watch out for. He didn't exactly burst onto the scene, though, at Barcelona in terms of the first team. He ended up going back to Japan, joining FC Tokyo on a free transfer. He then ended up at Yokohama on a loan deal. And in the end, Real Madrid picked him up from FC Tokyo. They then loaned him out to Real Mallorca. He returned from Real Mallorca and went to Villarreal on loan, returned from Villarreal, and then went from Real Madrid to Getafe before going back to Mallorca, and then from Mallorca back to Real Madrid before eventually joining Real Sociedad for 6.5 million euros. So what that's kind of prompted me to do now is looking at that and looking at how much time he has spent in La Liga with a number of clubs. I want to look at his stats by competition. Let's have a look at this. In terms of La Liga, He's never got more than 9 goals. 22-23 was his best season where he got 9 goals. 7 the year after, which we've just discussed. 1 goal in 21-22 in 28 appearances. 1 in 2021, 18 appearances that year. So his best season has been a 9 in terms of goal return, 7 assists that year as well. So he was, pretty well rounded that season. And I think that's the season that probably pushed Takefusa Kubo up people's kind of want lists. But has he followed that up? Well, the season after 23-24 wasn't that different. 7 goals rather than 9, 4 assists rather than 7. So not a massive difference, but he hasn't followed that up again this season. And that's, I don't know if it's a cause for concern, because we've seen players that haven't been very good at other clubs come to Arsenal and be excellent. So I don't think you should look at the statistics and sort of base your decision entirely on them. I think you need to look at players, that you need to do the eye test. You need to figure out for yourself if you think that they will fit and if you think that it will work. But yeah, I mean, based on the top level stuff, I mean, I'm not against it because I have heard good things about this young man, but it's not one that I'm sort of desperate to see us do in the sort of immediate future, if that makes sense. But hey, that's just where I'm at. Lots of comments around Kubo in the chat. Let's pick some of those up. What have we got here? Jean Rene says, I like Kubo a lot. I think I would prefer him to the Athletic Bilbao winger, talking about Nico Williams there. That's an interesting take. Tom says, has Kubo ever played on the left wing or up front? I'm just wondering if he fits the versatile forward criteria that Mikel clearly likes. Well, just looking at this, he has. He predominantly plays from the right, but he has played at times from a central position, just off the striker, and also from the left-hand side. I don't know how often he's played those positions and those roles, but you can see it here on Transfermarkt that he is someone that's believed to be able to cover all of those positions. And that's a really good point that you make. Does he fit in with Mikel Arteta's versatility thing? It is a big thing for Mikel. Tom also goes on to say, having a compatriot in Tomiyasu and a former teammate in Marino would be helpful to fast track his integration at Arsenal too. This could help him hit the ground running. All good points. Really, really good points. But yeah, I mean, it's a rumor that's come from a Japanese journalist. I don't know how much there is in this, but I thought it was worth bringing up and discussing, seeing as we're in transfer silly season. Takefusa Kubo, a player that's been linked with a move away from Real Sociedad for quite some time, but it's never materialized. Could it happen now? Yeah. If he was to come in, I would give him a chance, like I give everybody a chance. But is it the kind of signing that would get me sort of up off my seat and applauding the recruitment team? Based on what I've looked into this morning, and it is a very sort of brief bit of research. It is a vague bit of research. And as I say, we'll do that scouting report if we need to. I don't want to get into doing those too early in the month, because you just end up putting a ton of work in on a load of players that we just aren't going to sign. So I'm going to reserve those for a little bit later on in the window. And, if we do get those concrete reports, then of course we'll jump on them straight away. But with Kubo, it is just a rumor at the minute. I'm not against the signing, but I'm also not massively excited about the prospect either, if that makes sense. Let me know what you think. Okay, let's move on to our next story. And I want to talk about a report that's doing the rounds. It's come from Team News and Ticks online on X. He's normally very, very good in terms of having information, lots of stuff about team news, and has been very good on transfers in the past. And let me make it clear, right? I'm not having a go at the person behind the Team News and Ticks account, like whatever, like each to their own. You do your thing, I'll do mine. I'm not in the business of claiming I have information. I think there are people out there that do. And I do believe that he's one of them. And I think that, that's a very unique position to be in, and it has its value, obviously. I'm not in that boat, right? So I don't ever sit here and tell you I know this or I know that. I think I've maybe done it 2 or 3 times over the course of the 4 years that this podcast has been running. And I've only done it when I'm absolutely adamant and sure. So I'm not coming into this window telling you this or that, nor am I in a position, is the point I'm trying to make, to dismiss the information provided by others. Okay. I don't think that's fair. So I wanted to put that out there and make it clear that I'm not having a go at any individual, but I don't like this type of reporting. Now, you're going to ask, what type of reporting am I talking about? Well, the report says an unnamed player is very close to agreeing personal terms with Arsenal. And the suggestion is that Arsenal are trying to get this unnamed player to agree those personal terms to make their lives easier when they then try and get this player out of their club. They believe, as we've seen Arsenal do in the past, that if Arsenal can agree those personal terms and get the player on board, then it becomes a much easier negotiation with the selling club because that player is pushing from their side as well. So my problem with this type of reporting is it's just so vague. It isn't even a story. Like, to say an unnamed player, you're not showing me that you know something. You're not showing me anything really. What you're doing is putting something out there that you might have on good authority, but it's the kind of story that you just can't lose on. And the reporting and the journalism that I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but that I respect most is when people go out on a limb, right? You hear something, you go out on a limb, you source it, you check it, you go out on a limb, knowing that if you get it wrong, it can have a negative impact on your reputation. That's brave, that's bold journalism. And sometimes you'll get it wrong because the source that gave it to you got it wrong. And I am not someone who writes off journalists when they get something wrong, because I've been in the position where I've tried to source information. I gave up a long time ago on that side of things, and I became more of a sort of commentator, opinion giver than that, because when I was first starting out and I wanted to be a journalist, I just found that side of it really hard and really draining. Okay. But saying an unnamed player means you're 99.9% going to be right. And so where is the value in that? Like, where is the insider info? Like, I think we all believe that over the course of the January window, Arsenal are going to make a signing. Who that's going to be, nobody knows. How much it's going to cost at this moment, nobody knows. Whether it's going to happen now or later on in the window, nobody knows. And so if you put something as vague as that out, and he hasn't done this obviously yet because it's not happened, but if you put something that vague out and then try and claim a win, it's not really a win for me, because you've not actually given us any information. You've not actually gone out on a limb and said, this is the guy or that's the guy. All this unnamed stuff, it's too vague. It's so vague that for me, it's not a story. But I wanted to address it because a lot of people seem to be getting really excited about this online. And I just don't share that enthusiasm towards something that is very vague and actually doesn't give me any information. And again, I'll repeat the point. This is not to have a go at the person behind the account. Lots of people do this. It's common practice. It seems to happen a lot in the social media age, and that's fine. But it's not something that I personally am going to get, dragged into, because unnamed means nothing. Without the name, you have nothing. Without the name, there isn't a story. And so I'm just going to step back from that one. Just before we continue on through the show, I just want to quickly remind you guys that the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast is partnered at the minute with NordVPN, the best VPN service out there. It's a service that I personally can't do without anymore, whether you're looking to stream your favorite movies or all the sporting action. NordVPN is the one for you. It is a game changer, and you can sign up via the link in the description. Visit nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC for a mega discount and 4 months free at the end of your plan. Not only does it give me extra protection when surfing the web, downloading or streaming, but I now have the ability to access geo-blocked content by changing my location virtually with just the click of a button. Sign up now via nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC and take advantage of this amazing offer. Plus, with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, it's totally risk-free, and you won't regret it. nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC. We thank them for their support of the podcast. Okay, let's move on to another story. Let's talk Is it Jobi or Jobe Bellingham? I'm not sure. And I actually covered a game last season that Sunderland were involved in, and I found it really difficult to figure out what the correct um, pronunciation was for him. Look, he's a dead ringer for his brother. He looks exactly the same as him. And you know, he's ripping it up in the championship. Now, not necessarily in terms of goals and assists and all that, but he is a central midfield player, and it's I think his running power that has really attracted people to him. People are looking at Bellingham Jr. and are really excited. He's just 19 years old. He's playing for a club, of course, currently in the second tier that are going very well at the moment, and he's a big part of that. And when I watched him at QPR, I think it was last season, live in the flesh, I thought he reminded me a lot of his brother. And that's obviously a good thing because, you know, Jude Bellingham is doing really well and has got that move to Real Madrid and has not crumbled, has not struggled under the pressure of wearing the all-white kit. He's been great. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to translate onto his brother and that he's going to be of the same level, but he certainly looks an exciting prospect. And I think sometimes in these situations, it's very difficult to sideline the brother chat, but you have to look at the player as an individual. And I've been really impressed with him. He obviously came through at Birmingham as well, but joined Sunderland in July 2023 for 1.75 million. That's euros. So it's probably about 1.2, 1.3 million pounds, maybe slightly more than that. So not a mega transfer in terms of its value and the price, but you know, he is someone that I'm sure is going to go on to, with all due respect to Sunderland, bigger and better things. And Arsenal are said to be one of the clubs that are monitoring him, that are tracking him, that have sent people to watch him. He's not a secret. Everybody knows how good he is. Everybody knows that he's on a real upward trajectory. And so it's no surprise that Arsenal have decided to do that, if that is indeed the case. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that story and put it on your radar because I think he is someone that that will be on the move very soon. Whether it will be to Arsenal, I don't exactly know, but he is said to be on our radar. And the next player I want to talk about, just to kind of finish off on today's transfer pod, and remember, we are going to be bringing you a preview of that trip to the Amex Stadium as well. So there's still plenty of content coming your way over the next 24 hours. So make sure you're staying tuned. Make sure you've subscribed, liked, all the rest of it. In fact, I'm just going to remind you once again, if you're watching us on YouTube, guys, please, those like buttons, they really do help. The like buttons, pressing the likes, I should say. And I can see that there is loads and loads of you watching us right now. So please, if you haven't done so already, leave a like. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free, but it massively helps me out. In fact, before we go on to talk about the next player, and I do want to talk about Evan Ferguson very briefly, I do want to address something that's come up quite a bit in the comment section over the last few days. It's come up in the comments post live streams. It's come up on social media. It's coming up a lot. So I do want to touch on it. James Bond says, there's no more 90 Min show in the mornings, Harry. I had a message yesterday saying, why did you guys cancel the 90 Min show? So I want to be completely clear and transparent around what's happened here. And it probably wasn't the time to do that when it first ended. So I didn't, and none of the other guys did either. And I'm not trying to cause anything or create anything, but I think it's important that we say it because people keep asking me, people keep saying, you know, where is it? You know, what's happened to it? Look, it ended because there was a decision taken that the business was going to prioritize other things. And it wasn't something that we instigated. It wasn't something that we wanted to do. Like, we wanted to keep it running, but we could see that it was something that probably wasn't going to last very much longer. And so we decided to leave it on the high and leave it, you know, in our way, on our terms, if that makes sense, because we knew that it didn't have much longer to run. Just because businesses change, priorities change, funding changes, etc. It wasn't us that decided to just pack it all in. We put so much work into it over the years, and we'd all been super committed, and we'd created great friendships and a real chemistry. I don't think any of us really wanted to do it. And I remember when we finished recording that kind of goodbye episode, everybody was really sad and down in the dumps. And when I look back on it, I still feel that way because I spent 3, maybe 4 years of my life turning up and doing that show 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 times a week. So it was a big thing for me. But it wasn't us that decided to reprioritize. It wasn't us that instigated its shutting down. We did in the end say, look, well, if this is only going to run for a short while longer, then let's start wrapping it up so that we can do it our way and in the right way. And that's kind of what happened. But anyway, let's get back to the transfer chat. That's what you're here for. Let's talk Evan Ferguson then, because again, he's a name that keeps coming up, and it's a name that if you spoke about him 2 seasons ago, everybody would have said, "Oh wow, oh wow, that's the one. Go and get him. Go and pay whatever Brighton want." And Brighton have developed this reputation of like bringing through players and then getting massive, major, mega amounts of money for them. And Evan Ferguson was tipped by a lot of people to be the kind of next one. Now, I don't want to write Evan Ferguson off as a player because he's only 20 years old, and I don't think that's fair. But you look at him this season, 12 appearances in the Premier League. He's only been in the starting 11% of the time for Brighton in the Premier League this season. So it's clear that Fabian Hurtzler isn't seeing what he wants to see. And he's got just the one goal. If I go back to last season with Evan Ferguson as well, and I know I keep saying stats shouldn't be the be all and end all and then reeling off a load of stats, but I do think it's important that you look at this stuff. You go back to 23, 24, 27 appearances in the Premier League, far more. But again, just 6 goals over the course of the campaign. If you go back to 22, 23, so you're going back one more season, you're talking about 6 goals and 2 assists in 19 Premier League appearances. But he was obviously much younger at this point, and there was a lot less expected of him. The point I'm trying to make with Evan Ferguson is that I just don't feel that he kicked on. I just don't feel that when he initially burst onto the scene and everybody was sort of super impressed with him, I don't think he was then able to go to that next level. And it can be down to a lot of things. You don't write off the player because clearly there's something there. We've all seen it before. But when a player doesn't kick on and barely plays, you start to think, okay, maybe A, his level isn't quite where it should be, but B, it could be a case where the manager just doesn't fancy him. And we've seen that with loads of players over the past. So I'm not sitting here telling you that Evan Ferguson can't go on to be the striker that maybe 2 years ago people thought he would. I'm not saying that Evan Ferguson's trajectory is downward, and I'm not saying that I'm writing the guy off. He's 20 years old, okay? And I think he performed so well that he sort of inadvertently made the sort of pressure around him increase, and he made people start to expect a great deal from a player that just wasn't ready to deliver that. And now it looks like he's had a massive come down when actually he's probably just slowed down in terms of his development. I think he's got something. I think he can go on and have a very good Premier League career under the right manager. He probably needs to play a lot more. He probably needs to feel the trust of the manager, and he's probably not getting that from Fabian Hurtzler based on how little he's played. I also don't think he's always been fit, and that's just a hunch of mine, but I'll just have a quick look now. Yeah, look, he started the season with an injury, so he missed the first 3 games, Everton, United, and Arsenal. He was unavailable for those games. He has come back into the picture, but he's got 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 17 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 11 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. So he's not really had that much time to kind of make the impact that we all know he can. It feels like a move away from Brighton is probably the right thing for Evan Ferguson right now. And in the past, people were saying it because they thought he needed that move to kind of kick on and progress his career. And actually now it feels like he needs that move just to kind of keep it alive. And that, for me, means that Brighton can no longer command the mega fee that they were talking about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. So if you do see something in him, now's an opportunity, I would say, to go and get him in a cut price deal. Transfermarkt still have him valued at around about £35 million. I think that's a bit much, but it's a massive come down from the sort of 70, 80, 90 million pound that he was being talked about as being valued at when he first burst onto the scene and when there was first talk of a potential move away. So things can change really, really quickly in football, and you have to be wary of that. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on today's transfer pod. Remember, we'll be bringing you a preview of the Brighton game I'm sure we'll be touching on Evan Ferguson during that at some point as well. If I could quickly remind you, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. They really, really do help. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new. That helps as well. And if you're listening on audio, those reviews, please get them in, especially if you're an Apple Podcasts listener. You can check us out on patreon.com/Chronicles AFC as well if you are interested. But your support via likes and reviews is just as valued to me. So thank you all so much. I'll see you all on the other side. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Goodbye.